What's it like to be seen but not noticed? What causes groups of people to set a standard of what is acceptable for certain feelings and desires, but places a detestable standpoint on another? Let's talk about the elephant in the room for those whose desires for love have caused them to be shunned or ostracized. Those that are hidden in plain sight.
Thank you so much for joining us here at the Big E, the elephant in the room. My name is Jackie.
And my name is Melissa.
And we're here to discuss what is normally not talked about. Today we have two special guests. We have a gentleman by the name of C.B. Murray, and the other one will go unnamed for now. But we're here to talk about hidden in plain sight. This topic is a little bit touchy because it deals with something that is a taboo in the church and even in society. I chose this topic and that title because it seems as if things are just taken for granted. For example, we have people that are in the field of fashion, in the field of music. All these things are appreciated and welcomed, but is the whole person accepted and accounted for? There are a lot of things that are also unnoticed and seen and unseen, and we have a lot of emotions and feelings that are not expressed freely as if everything else is. So I wanted to bring this topic to discussion today, as we can see any other things that we can bring out on the table to help ourselves and to help others who may be having the same issue. Again, we have our guest here, and I will ask Mr. Murray, how does it feel to be taken for granted, or if you're taken for granted for your talents and your experiences? And can you just give us a little bit of background about yourself?
Call me CB. Mr. Murray is too formal. My talents, and I believe you want to know about my talents being used in the church, correct?
Yes, but before we get into that, is there any way that you can give us a brief bio about yourself?
Oh, okay,
please?
sure. I am a writer, producer, performer, composer. What you would remember that I did when I was young was the original company of Dreamgirls on Broadway with Michael Bennett, Felicia, Jennifer, Shirley Ralph.
Bring us into where it all began for you when it came talking about an alternative lifestyle and any type of treatment that the church would give for you.
Okay, well, when I was in Dreamgirls, my lover and I had been together for like 2 years. Keith was the poster for Alvin Ailey at that time. And Keith broke his foot. He broke his foot on the road. He came home and we went to the doctor and they said he had a broken metatarsal, or with the big bone. It was cracked and they would have to put a pin in it. And that because of that, he probably would never dance again. Mm-hmm. And it was devastating. I mean, he had worked his whole life to be the principal dancer for Alvin. And I was going into rehearsals for I was just coming out of rehearsals from the workshop of Dreamgirls, waiting to start the Broadway production. So we were at home that summer, and a friend of mine invited me to a Bible study. The Bible study was in his mother's basement. I don't know if you remember Noel Pointer. He played violin. He was a jazz violinist. Well, his mother and his brother and his sister became Christians, and they started holding Bible studies in his mother's basement. So they invited Ben Harney, who was in the show with us, invited me to bring Keith to this Bible study. And so I did. And so we went to this Bible study. It was in the basement, and they were charismatic, and I came from the Baptist. So when they started saying, "I, the Lord, that God," I was like, these people crazy, because I don't know Jesus, but thank God. I was all like that. But they prayed for Keith, and then someone said that God was going to heal him. And I said, "Oh, that's wonderful. God was going to heal him." Well, he did, because when we went back to the doctor to get an X-ray before the operation, the bone had severed itself back together. And we were like, it was literally a miracle. And I was like, wow, God did that. He really did heal you. And that made me want to keep going to the Bible study. Well, that's when things got kind of murky, because the more I went to the Bible study, the more they kept telling me that Keith and I could not be together.
Who's that? Who told you that?
Well, those were the people leading the discussions, the
Discussion.
Bible, at that time, it wasn't a church, but all of them went to separate churches, and they were telling us that we were living in sin, that this was not what was supposed to be. And it became stressful because I wanted to serve God, but I knew that we had been together and that we were like this perfect couple. Long story short, we decided to break up, and he decided to go on the road, and I decided to quit show business and work with the church.
Wow.
Was that as a result of what everybody was suggesting you do, or?
Well, it was a lot of pressure because I was a semi-celebrity in New York at that time, and I was coming up with things. I think like a producer, so I always come up with, I can create an event out of nothing. So I was always coming up with events and ways. Eventually, the Bible study became a full-fledged ministry, and I was basically running it. But I was, in a way, my talents and and everything I could do was being used to push forth this organization. But personally, I had to let my needs and my desires go to do that. And I was told that was what God wanted me to do. In fact, they said something to me that I'll never forget. The pastor of the church at that time said, well, there are some people that God just never wants to be married. He actually wants them for himself. I'm like, oh, okay. Gotcha. So I allowed that mentality, that brainwashing to be, because I felt that I was serving God, and I wanted other people to experience the miracle that I had seen happen to my friend. But I didn't know that at the time. I was too naive and young to understand that the miracle had nothing to do with how they saw me. And if I had known what I know now, God would have never done a miracle on my friend if my friend was not acceptable to God.
That's right.
So that forced me as an individual to do a lot of studying on my own. I actually taught theology for Logos International Bible College in Florida. And one of the things I've done was I've had to come to grips with, I cannot blame God for what people do. And that's very difficult for most of us, because people people run away from the church because of what people do, and God is blamed for what these people do. When I studied God for myself, when Jesus said, there was this part of this woman, and they said the woman husband died and the brother married her, but then that brother died, and they gave her to 7 brothers until all the brothers died, but she still had no children. And they asked Jesus, whose wife will she be when she gets to heaven? And Jesus said, well, y'all look stupid, because in heaven, nobody's anybody's wife or husband. And at that point, I realized that God did not care about who we loved or who we had physical relationships with on earth, as long as our heart was right with him. So to say that my relationship with God is stunted or has to do with where my affections lie makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. Does that make sense? Because I feel like I'm rambling.
Absolutely. And I like how you tied in your experience and what you did with that type of judgmental behavior from people, and what you did for yourself, and how you had to find your salvation for yourself. So that's what's very important. Okay.
Okay, so I have a question basically for both panel guests. Both Mr. Murray, you did say that you felt a certain way when you were in this Bible study. When it came to these individuals starting to look at you and start judging and try to just kind of just say, this is not of God's will. And this is, you need to basically go your separate ways and not be together. And this is not God's way. And, biblically, and this is just me thinking out of what people think in our world and what doctrine is saying, what the Bible is saying. They say, God, man and woman, woman and man, that's it. And that, this is just me just speaking on what a lot of people, their thought process. Now, when I look at all of this, and I look at how the church is saying my issue behind all of this and how you felt, it is emotionally. How did that long term affect you, even with your person, like you're saying, your personal relationship? But now that descends down on, what if other family members of your loved one saw this same behavior? How are they affected by their loved ones being treated this way? Because that is something that I have always come to question. It's almost like a kind of like a stigma when you have someone that wants to live a certain way, express themselves a certain way, and this is their choice. And like you said, this is between you and God. Your personal relationship, this is between you and God. They don't have the right to judge who you want to love, who you want to be with. But now you have your family, and you're expressing your thoughts to your family, your loved one, about your personal situation or how people treated you. Now, how is that your family going to think long term and emotionally deal with that? Because now they're saying, okay, this is, no matter what, this is who he is, and we're going to love him no matter what. But now your family now has to
deal with all that baggage.
Exactly. Exactly. So that is always something that I have resonated. It's sometimes not even just the person that's going through the situation. People have to understand, you're now taking that on to your family and expressing that to your family. And now your family is now saying, wow, this loved one shouldn't have to go through this. This is unacceptable. God's love is love no matter what. We love this person no matter what. So why can't society express and accept this person for who they are? So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, first, I would hope that, like you said, the family would have that mentality about it, that they would be that supportive and that they would love you beyond what the expectations of their religious community is expecting from you. So that would be a good thing if all families did that, just that. Unfortunately, they all don't, but praise God for the one who did, you know.
I remember when I was 11 or 12 years old and I was going to church. I was going to have a wonderful day with my friends and my family. And when I got to church, mind you, this is like one of my first experiences liking a guy or seeing that a guy was attractive or whatever. So I walked into church and I saw like this guy on the praise and worship team. And in my head, I was just like, wow, he's really, really attractive. He sings well, he dresses nice. Everything about this man is just awesome. So in my head, I'm just like, who can I tell? Who can I talk to? You know, who can I express how I feel? So of course I went to my friends and I, you know, explained to them how I felt and everything. And one of my friends was like, I feel like you should talk to a minister about your feelings. And I was just like, why would I talk to a minister about how I feel? Like, I don't really know this minister. They're just like, I feel like you're troubled. I feel like there's something going on with you that you need to express to someone who's higher than us. And I'm just like, oh, okay. So I go up to the minister and, you know, this is hard for me because, you know, as a person who has these feelings in the church is never a good thing. So I went up to him and I was just like, hi, Mr. So-and-so. I think I have a feeling for men. And the first thing he said, he was just like, that's just wrong. You should never feel like that. The goal in life is to be with a woman, is to be married to a woman, is to always feel loved by a woman. And in my head, I'm just like, but I don't. Like, when I heard that, I was just like, okay, you're supposed to be a minister who is practicing godly teachings and, you know, things like that. And for you to say something like that to a person who is Christian, a child who is Christian, that doesn't help that child out. So
I've had to repent in my own heart of being a part of the problem. You know, that how they say abusers abuse. Because I had to when I finally got myself together find people that I had told that they needed to get out of, they needed to live right because they were doing what I was doing, and apologize to them. Because it was wrong when it was done to me, and it was wrong when I did that to them. I've had to search and find people that love God, and I know some ministers that love God that have no issues with gender and choice, who realize that God is not homophobic. You know, most people think about the LGBTQ community, or they think about homosexual men, and they think about all this promiscuity and all this darkness, and it's shrouded in all these shadows. And when you think about our country, gay people were always in shadows because they were afraid to be hurt.
Right.
So they had to hide and run and do things in places that normally they didn't even want to be there, but if they had no choice but to be in this dark place, because if anyone ever found out who they were, their lives were in danger, or they could lose their jobs, or they could be put out. So a lot of what they want to, what the church or religious people want to blame homosexuals for is what they did to them themselves.
I never left the church, but like I always felt like I could never be myself in church. I never felt like I could do anything in regards to how I felt because of what I liked or what I loved or whatever. So as a result, like it wasn't until like I got into college where I found who I was and, you know, what I expressed and how I felt about, you know, men or whatever. And to this day, I see the guy like around town sometimes, and it's hard for me to like, you know, go up to him and, you know, talk to him because I just remember that story and that experience that I had so long ago. I'm 21, about to turn 22 in a couple of days, and that conversation still like frightens me to this day. And mind you, like I feel good about myself because I've come a long way. If you can talk to any of my friends, they know that it's been hard for me, but I think my junior year is when I just kind of released how I felt to like the public or the world. So that just experience just never ever left my mind.
With that experience that you dealt with and you went through, what would you recommend any pastor, minister, going forward with another young person that has that same thought or feelings or experience? What would you give them in advice to how to go about going forward when a young person of the millennial world that comes in and says, hey, I'm this is how I feel, this is who I want to be with, and that same pastor, you know, he shuns you away, and putting you, you know, giving you all the doctrine, and how do you think they should move forward and giving positive or more of a more transparent insight to help them along the way?
The first thing I would say would to never say what the pastor said to me or what he tried to say to me for me to kind of like get. In regards to like advice, I really don't know because, you know, it's such a hard subject for a pastor, but, you know, in this world that we live in, it's kind of like out. Like everyone sees it. So like it's no surprise that this is what we're dealing with on a daily basis. So that's a really tough question because for me as a friend, I can, you know, explain to someone that I'm going to be there for you. I'm going to love you regardless of how you feel. But that is pretty hard. Mr. Murray, would you like to say something?
Yeah. I was talking about a story about my sons. I was doing a show, and I used to say to God, I wish I had a gay son. I wish I had a son that I could talk to about what it was like for me growing up, so that he would not have to go through the stuff that I went through.
Right, and I would love that.
And I got hired to do a show called The Seven. I gotta be careful, I can't call people's names. And two actors played my sons in this particular. I was Oedipus, and it was a hip hop opera. I was Oedipus, and Oedipus wants to kill his son so he can keep his kingdom. And there were two sons, and they both are like my sons today. We did this show about 7 years ago, And one of the young men was a gay young man who was extremely talented and just amazing. I looked at him work. I said, this guy's going to be a star. This guy's got everything. And he was just just beautiful. And so I told him, I said, well, you can always be my son now that you played my son. And we laughed, and we became really good friends. And he would call me up crying all the time, like, oh, this guy done broke my heart, because he would always put himself out there, keep getting his heart broken. And I was like, okay, we need to talk. So I realized that I said, okay, if you were my son, this is the advice I would give you from the time you've been growing up. And I realized I would give him the same advice that I give my children, and that is to be slow in giving themselves to someone. You would tell your daughter, don't be too fast or too quick to give yourself to someone. Make sure they are worthy of you. And so you know, it's a quick and fast world up in New York. And I said, most gay guys sleep with somebody first and then try to get to know them later. Then they're sorry about the person they were sleeping with. I said, I want you, the next time somebody says they like you, make them work for it and just make them date you for a very long time. And he said, okay. And he did. He was in a Broadway show and he met somebody that came into the show, and he made them work for it. And now they've been together for 3 years. And what you want to do is nurture them according to their needs. If I used to tell my sons, you know, somewhat the same thing. In my goddaughters, I am extremely protective. And I said, if I had a son who was like this, I would be protective as well, because I don't want to see his heart broken, and I don't want him getting caught up in that other world that could happen, because the devil wants to get anybody, heterosexual or homosexual, caught up in that promiscuity. So my thing was, you have to, what that pastor did to him was basically tell him to hate himself.
Right.
Self-hate is ugly and it's horrible. There's no place for it. You have to tell them to love themselves, and to love themselves so much that they love themselves too much to let somebody take advantage of them because they're precious.
And they're feeling like that same way every time you saw them.
I'm sorry.
Every time I see him, and you know, I can't call his name because right now he is working a lot, and his name is pretty out there. But now it's like, and his friend now is appreciative of me giving him that advice that made them get this relationship.
But what happens when people can't be accepted in the church?
They need to find another church.
You're not wrong.
God is bigger than that little building with those few people that are telling them what God is. God is bigger than that. We need safe places of fellowship for everyone.
And I think that is the biggest piece behind all of this, is God is love. God is very transparent. He doesn't place judgment. And I think if and this is not even to place even judgment on leadership in ministers or pastors, where I think, honestly, in today's world, there needs to be more counseling, more direction in how to minister, how to talk to individuals that are struggling and or dealing, like when you said, when you went to, or talk to the pastor, have someone, these pastors say, okay, if you have a member that is going through this and they want to come to you and confide in you, these are the steps that you need to take. Don't just say, nope, that's it, out the door. Go to another church, or we don't want you.
That's not helping. No.
So what are you teaching them? And then you wonder why your congregation is very slim, or it just takes that one person to get shunned away. And then they go out and then they wonder why is that person out in the world? Why are they're not coming back? Why are they not coming back? What did you do? What did you say? You didn't allow them to feel welcome. You didn't allow them to feel comfortable, to be transparent. Because people have to understand, unfortunately, the church It is a hospital, and that's what it is. And you're supposed to come there to be able to be to get the guidance, the right. And not every pastor, minister, or anyone in leadership has that proper place to be able to give that proper guidance. But maybe that's what needs to take place. Maybe they need their own counseling to be taught when they're in many pastoral studies, to be able to know when you're in this, because we're in a different place, we're in a different world. It is what it is, accept it. So maybe get that proper guidance to be able to know how to talk to individuals, so you can be more they can be able to help them through, not just them, but their families, their loved ones. Because like I said, it can trickle down to the families that feel like, why are these people not accepting my child? Why
Right.
are they turning away from me? Why isn't my child coming back to church? My child's not talking to me anymore. Well, did you know what the pastor said to your child?
Right.
This is such a hot topic and important things. We have so many things to talk about, but guess what? We're just out of time. We're just out of time. I love you all. Thank you so much for coming here. Audience, we have a reference for anyone that needs assistance and help. Thank you for watching The Biggie, the elephant in the room, while we talk the unspeakable. Thank you so much for joining us. You take care.
Thank you.